Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. It is really an exciting opportunity for me to just demonstrate again how I play with watercolor. During this demonstration, I like to just stress this is not the only way, this is just my way. And the whole idea is to make watercolor accessible and easy for everyone, because I know when you see a beautiful watercolor painting, there is this desire to be able to replicate that or create in a similar manner, loose and free. And that is exactly what I'm here to try and show you guys how to do. So I just started this painting with a loose sketch of an orchid in a pot, and I used my watercolor pencils to roughly sketch out my design so that I know where I'm having to place my color. And I've already had a little bit of blue sort of mixed in my palette there, so I just added a few greens and yellows just to make a nice darker green color to begin to paint in the stem. Now basically in this form of watercolor, what you're really doing is you're drawing with water. Think of it like that. So your brush is really your sort of drawing utensil, and the watercolor brush is able to hold the water in the belly of the brush a little bit longer than other brushes maybe designed for acrylic paint. So really what you're doing is you are mixing water that is colored with pigment, and you are basically drawing in your painting. So that for me is an oversimplified sort of idea about watercolor, but in essential that is exactly what it is. So we're just sketching in here with watercolor, and I'm just drawing in the basic stem of my orchid. And I just really want to make sure in this sort of attempt that I sort of nail the values that I'm wanting to achieve. I quite enjoy a strong color in my watercolor. Now that's not everyone's cup of tea, and that's perfectly okay, but I do enjoy the rich pigment that watercolor can offer. And you don't always have to go about a watercolor painting with thousands of little layers. That is one way to do it. I'm also sort of doing this whole painting sort of idea for beginners, where I give you a sort of a whole view here of the plant. And you might think like that's a lot of detail, but actually that's easier to do because you don't have to add that much detail for this beautiful painting to make sense. So the sort of closer that you zoom into subjects and the more detail that is evident in your painting, that's when watercolor can get a little bit more complex and interesting. And there's a variety of techniques really that you can employ to get that result, especially if you really want to go for photorealistic botanical studies, for example. But in this instance, we just want to enjoy painting with the medium of watercolor. And I'm just playing here with different variety of greens. I've got my well there of my basic green that I'm using. So I'm just making sure that one side of the orchid leaf is a little bit cooler and a little bit darker, and the other side maybe has a few more yellow tones added to it to just talk about that dividing line in the orchid leaf. I do love painting orchid leaves because they are big and long and very simple for me to capture the form. You can be very playful and expressionistic in your brush marks or in how you sort of create the shape. And it's not like rose leaves, for example, can be quite complex and for me sometimes difficult to paint, but I do enjoy a long orchid leaf like this. And basically laying down this paint in a wet onto dry method not pre-wetting my leaf, but I'm making sure that I've got enough sort of water and pigment in my brush to sort of create that first wash of color onto my paper. And then as I'm creating and drawing in the shape of this leaf, I'm also trying to leave a little bit of a white space in the middle, indicating where that fold in the leaf is. Here I'm just picking up some of the paint with a thirsty brush. I feel that there was a little bit too much blue on that leaf, so I'm going to pick up some cadmium yellow again and just work it back into that area. And I know that the yellow will flow into that blue, creating a beautiful green. I think the whole idea here is also to play with a variety of greens. Green straight out of a tube can look very artificial and not really true to nature. So I've learned early on to play with a variety of greens and change the value and the tone and the chroma of it by adding other colors like blues or even violets, sometimes reds, depending on if I want to add a shadow or not. I think the basic idea that I employ is warmer colors for in the sort of light and cooler colors for in the shadow. Like here I've added a bit of blue to indicate that leaf is turned over and it's a little bit darker underneath. So as soon as I've painted in my leaf structure, that basic space is wet. So everything that I do on top now is considered wet into wet. And I want these marks to flow and just for the magic of watercolor to happen on the page. I'm not trying to control every single little drop that I put down. And I'm sort of open from the beginning to allow little mishaps to happen if they happen, where there's color that flow into another color. I'm not going to try and stop or prevent that. Sometimes in the end that is exactly the little magic in your watercolor painting that makes it look fresh and beautiful. I'm just adding a bit more of my sap green and hooker's green to my well with a bit of water to create a bit of depth and shadow, especially on that right hand side of this leaf behind the stem of the orchid. Again, just blending in some areas that I feel can soften. Now the whole sort of idea is to go at this painting pretty much in one go. So what's nice in this exercise is that you've got different areas to work on. So I don't have to necessarily now stop and dry everything with a hairdryer before I can continue. So I've decided to drop in a little bit more yellow into the stem part of the orchid, just to sort of break down that bluish tone that I started off with. And I also just want to solidify and bring that forward so that it's very clear that the stem comes out of the center of the leaves that we've just painted. Now you will see me wipe out my well there, and the only reason why I sort of waste a bit of color there is I don't have a lot of space on my table to put out, a little porcelain palette for every single color. Ideally that is sort of what you can do, or you can use a bigger porcelain plate as a mixing palette. But I'm trying to sort of make use of the limited space that I have available, and if I see how I have to change the colors that I'm going to work with, then I just wipe whatever's left on my palette and then I switch my colors. So now I'm switching here to this bottom part of the little pot that the orchid is planted in. It's a beautiful white pot, and I really just want to play with a little bit of cool colors that would help communicate the fact that this is a white pot, and we want to just bring in a little bit of shadow. So my light source I've marked at the top right with an arrow coming down, and during the sketch I sort of indicated how the light would hit my subject here and where the shadow would fall. And using cooler tones like this cerulean blue and a little bit of dark-sizing violet to create an interesting shadow space beneath the pot that's going to ground it and make it feel like it is standing on something, and it's just giving it more presence on the page. I like shadows that also look alive, so instead of just using black or just grey for shadows, I like to use cooler tones to help communicate that shadow in a rich and beautiful way. I'm going to add a little bit more dark-sizing violet to my wash here before I switch to some Payne's Grey to deepen that shadow and to just firmly plant this orchid pot on the surface of the floor or table or whatever it's standing on. I did take a risk here because everything's wet down here, so I expected the Payne's Grey to flow deeper into my pot, but it worked out perfectly in the end. What I can suggest for the future is plan your shadow areas and sort of look at the whole shape of your shadow area and try to work with the color that you've got there, especially the value that you're looking for from the beginning, so that you don't have to come in with consequent layers in order to deepen that. Although that is possible, I do find sometimes that you can disturb underneath layers, especially with paper that's maybe not as professional as one can get. I'm going to switch strategy here and make a mixture. Now I think I want to get into the petals and begin to paint in the orchids. I'm going to be using a beautiful rosy kind of pink. I think it's rose madder or something scarlet like, I'm not sure. Rose, permanent rose. I think it's permanent rose. Beautiful warm pink color. Now as I paint in these petals, what I'm trying to go for again is variety as well. So this is wet onto dry, and then I will drop in a little bit more color into that as I go forward and create some interesting wash effects. So I'm basically choosing the two bigger side petals to be in this beautiful blush color, wet onto dry, creating the shape. And I've decided to just do a few of these shapes at a time. That would really help with time. Now while that is damp, I want to add a little bit of pyrrole orange to just brighten up that beautiful pink color. You can see the pyrrole orange has got a beautiful flow to it, and it will give you a beautiful wash effect in this beautiful permanent rose color. I'm going to rinse my brush, and I'm just observing my reference material, and I'm just looking at where can I continue my painting journey without majorly overdoing it on these petals. So I've gone for the most forward orchid and started with that mixture and then dropped in a bit more pink. Just observing where can I continue. I see the side petal here. I can paint some there as well, just creating that shape and that connection. It's a really pretty color. I'm going to add some violet to this mixture to cool it down and to just indicate that this shape that I'm going to paint now is maybe behind the ones that I've just painted. And this particular part of the flower is turned sort of sideways, it's foreshortened, so you only sort of look at the petal from the side, giving me an interesting shape to play with. And I'm okay with where it maybe touches on the other petals I've just painted. It will just create more interest and watercolor magic. That is exactly what we are trying to experience and enjoy. I've decided also just to connect this color with some color harmony and sort of make the head petal of the orchid this color, working on the toe of the brush to connect it on the center. And then I'm also avoiding the two sort of crown nodes in the center of each of these orchids that's going to be painted yellow at the end. I'm going to do these side little front shortened ones in this dark color as well, sitting behind the petals. So I'm negatively painting around the bigger petals as I bring in the foreshortened smaller sort of petals behind the big ones. I really do like how these colors turned out. Aren't they pretty? It's just so cool. Nice. Great job. Now I do think we need to leave these alone now so that they can dry. I'm mixing a bit of Payne's Grey into that mixture. And I added a little bit of sepia brown. Now what happened was I refilled my color well yesterday with fresh paint, and as I was trying to pick up a little bit of that pigment, my brush picked up the entire dollop of fresh paint. So now I have a whole palette filled with too much brown sepia, which is quite a powerful potent. But anyway, I just need a small area to paint in with this beautiful brown. So I've just had to add a lot of water to the palette, mixing palette, in order to make sure that I don't just make everything look black. So I'm just negatively painting the earth in the pot, carefully around those roots that tend to sort of overgrow on the sides. This is really giving us a beautiful presence. It's grounding this plant right in the center of this beautiful white pot. I'm literally going to try and save some of that paint by sort of pushing it back into my well, but I soon realized it's a futile job. It is what it is. So I'm going to clean my palette so that I can mix my next color. Right, let's add some water to the palette. I'm going to use that pyrrole orange. I really love this color. It's from Core. It's just got a brilliant flow to it, and if you use it in a very diluted way, it's just such a happy orange. I really love it. So I'm going to make like a coffee-like strength mixture of this color. And now I'm going to do a wet into wet technique using clean water first to just wet the paper in the segment that I want to drop in that beautiful orange color, and I want it to flow. So I'm going to focus on placing the pigment closer towards the orchid leaves and allow the pigment to spread out from there. But I am wetting the paper first, and I'm turning my head sideways to just observe the glare of the water to make sure that it's really where I need it. And then I will drop in the paint and look at that beautiful effect that it is going to give me. And because I know there's this sort of water base that I'm releasing the pigment into, I'm not too worried that it's going to be too dark or it's going to sort of overwhelm my painting. So basically just prepare the paper with water and then drop a strong enough mixture of your paint in there, and that's going to give you a beautiful background that you can manipulate and control as you see fit in order to really make this painting come to life. So I'm sort of going in a vignette style around my orchid. I'm not really adding water to the background all the way to the taper's edge. I'm really focusing more towards coming in tight against the orchid and then adding my pigment from that point and allowing it to spread out. Now you sort of need that water on the paper in order to get this beautiful result, and some watercolors flow better than others, and it's to do with the ox guile that is in the watercolor. And Core is one of those professional watercolor brands that really does the job very well, and they've got a synthetic ox guile that helps with this beautiful flow effect of the watercolor. So you can rest assured no animals were hurt during the production of this fine pigment. Oh, isn't it amazing how that pretty warm color just makes the leaves of the orchid pop out from the paper, and it makes that shadow on the bottom left just look so alive because they are contrasting colors. The orange and the blue there are opposite on the color wheel, and that is giving us a beautiful contrast space to play with. Now here I'm carefully pre-wetting the paper around these roots that is sort of sticking out into the air, so that when I come in with my wash that I don't paint those roots of the orchid sometimes look silvery or even white. So I sort of want the paper to do the job for me here, so I'm just very careful to paint around it and to bring in the details there that I need. So a bit of negative painting, something that I really enjoy to do with watercolor. Now while the paper is still wet, I can come in with a few more drops of this warm orange color there just to push the contrast a little bit more. Again, carefully painting around the root and around the white pot by pre-wetting the paper and making sure that it is placed exactly where I need it to be for the beautiful magical moment when I drop in the paint. Just look at that beautiful pigment flow. It really is the magic of watercolor. It does the job for you if you know how to provide the way for the pigment to flow. So I really hope you guys are enjoying this video. If you like what you see and you want to learn the skills that I'm demonstrating here, then consider joining my Patreon. At this present moment, I am your watercolor wizard, and I am creating a beautiful watercolor for beginner online class that you can engage with at your own leisure and time, where I will show you exactly what you need to know in order to get to this beautiful stage of watercolor painting. This can be so fulfilling and rewarding. I just know you're going to love it. So check out the details in the description of this video. It is only for my paying tier on Patreon. It's only $5 a month, which is not a lot. I would love to see you over there, and then you will gain access to all of the exclusive episodes of this watercolor for beginner tutorial. I'm just going to strengthen my shadow on some of my leaves, and also on the pot, exactly where it's standing on that surface. It's still a little bit see-through for me there, so I might have to add a little bit more sort of intensity. I also have a shadow of this leaf that is sticking over the pot that I still needed to paint in. And even though the wash next to the pot is still a little bit damp, there will be some seepage there. In the end, it's just going to turn out beautiful. I sometimes like it when there's soft edges and hard edges. It sort of adds to the beauty and freshness of watercolor, and that's part of its magic and its allure. Now I wish I did go a little bit stronger with my shadow beneath the pot, but it's okay. We can always add another little wash to strengthen that contrast. I'm going to use my Payne's Grey here and just draw it out, and then I'm going to rinse my brush, and then I'm going to dab most of the water off my brush, and then I'm just going to drag it over that hard edge to make it blend into my shape. There you go. I'm adding a bit more sap green to that mixture, and a little bit of blue. I did want to just emphasize and strengthen the shadow side of the stem, especially to sort of push the contrast here a little bit to ground that stem into the center of the plant, make it stand out from the leaf in the background. Also strengthening the shadow on that turned over leaf. Isn't it amazing how just adding a little bit more of a contrast on each of these leaves, it helps to tell the story and just brings in a little bit more definition and drama to the piece. Now I'm going to just grab some cadmium yellow here. It's like a honey consistency, and I'm just going to aim straight at these sort of yellow pods that's in the crown of each of these orchid plants. And there you have it. Isn't it beautiful? I just really love how cool and beautiful this painting turned out. I can't wait to remove the painter's tape around the edge, and that's just going to give us a beautiful clean edge. And this painting is signed and it is ready to be framed. I really enjoyed this painting, and I did enjoy all of the freshness that I was able to achieve with this very easy way of painting in watercolor. I hope you enjoyed this class. Bye bye for now.